We're all very excited. Today we're going to be hearing from Professor Craig Palsson. Craig Palsson is an assistant professor of economics at the John M. Huntsman School of Business. Craig received his bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University and his PhD from Yale University, where he attended as a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellow. His dissertation was a finalist for prizes at the Economic History Association and Society for Institutional and Organizational Economics. Before coming to USU, he was an assistant professor at the Naval Postgraduate School. Craig works at the intersection of economic history and economic development. He focuses on how institutions such as property rights and state capacity evolve in developing countries. A lot of this work looks at institutions in the economic history of Haiti. So without further ado, we're going to turn the time over to Professor Craig Palsson. Thank you.
I'm going to carefully negotiate these stairs because I have some students yesterday that witnessed me fall downstairs screaming out in pain. And when I told my wife about this story, she just laughed at me. No sympathy at all. Just like my students, no sympathy at all. They felt that it was quite deserved because they were taking a test. So it is fun to see a lot of my students here. I'm excited to have you here. So how many of you have taken my Management 1050 class? Okay, good. I mean, that seems like about half, which is great because some of this you've already heard from like a semester of being brainwashed by me. Let's see, how many of you are trying to figure out what your major is? You're undecided on your major right now. Out of everyone, not just people from my class. Okay, so not as many people undecided. You'll realize within this hour that you're not sure what you want to major in because you'll be so persuaded by this case for studying economics that you will go out and you'll meet with the counseling center to see what you can do to change your major. First, let me explain to you that everybody loves economists, and this has a long tradition back to 1831. Economists are the very worst authorities in matter of legislation and philosophy. Now, this is 1831. Does that feeling still persist till today? Well, here's just from a few years ago a headline. It's obvious why so many people think economists are idiots. We're often featured, I think, well, I don't know more so, but in terms of like majors, we're often featured as the butt of jokes, especially in Dilbert. This isn't Dilbert. This is Saturday morning breakfast cereal. Learning economics has ruined my ability to have friends. Here, I'm willing to pay $20 to achieve my preference to not have to hear about your breakup. Now, everyone's better off. And if you've studied, sometimes I feel like I need to explain these jokes, right? Like, the idea is, what is the trade-off someone's willing, like, I really want to explain to you how much this breakup has hurt me, but I also would like $20. Which one do I take? And this person is exploiting people's indifference curves. All right, maybe not as funny. Here's another one. Let's start a brief refresher in macroeconomics. This diagram, which probably looks a lot like what you guys have seen in classes, explains why I'm an expert at money, yet I dress like a flood victim. You'll have no trouble with the rest of the course unless your mechanical pencil jammed. Let's erase. I came in and I saw the business council and I was like, crap, I'm way underdressed for this talk. This kind of rings true. Here's another Dilbert one. Our CEO wants to promote you to chief economist because nothing you say makes sense. He thinks that's a sign of a great economist. It totally is, and it really is. Say something smart. Whoa, I don't want to create an oversupply of wisdom, right? Great stuff to make fun of economists. Don't worry, some people come to our defense. Why humans hate economists, part one, the wrong reasons, and then realize here are the right reasons to actually hate economists, right? A lot of people just seem down on economists, which I find really interesting, given that when I talk to a lot of people, they often don't quite understand what economics is or why they would major in it. And that's why I'm here, is to try and help you understand what economics is, why you should major in it, and what kind of jobs will be available to you if you major in economics. I love economics so much that I've created a YouTube channel about economics. And for some reason, the most popular video on this channel is about the college admissions scandal, which is just full of economics, right? It's just crazy all the economics involved that has led to this scandal. This video today will pass 40,000 views, which I feel is like pretty impressive, right? Like again, I'm not like I'm a very small guy. This channel just started in January. And this view about the college admission scandal has gotten a lot of people interested in the economics involved. This isn't the main focus. Unfortunately, like most of those 40,000 views are people who are just interested in celebrity gossip. Not quite my target audience. So I've done one on the price of vibranium in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, going through and collecting data from the movies to show you how much vibranium costs. I've done one on Marvel and DC, when they actually worked together in a cartel to raise comic book prices. And that how Marvel, the reason why Marvel is so much better than DC today, like there's not even a competition, okay? Like Marvel is way better than DC. The reason why is because they broke from that cartel and they gained market dominance. So I go through and explain some of what happened there. I think it's super interesting. I also, just this week, released a video on the economics behind Avengers, like Avengers Infinity War, right? The central conflict of that movie is economics, right? It's this idea that Thanos has about economic growth and the determinants of economic growth and the policies that he needs to implement to ensure economic growth, right? Like that is the central conflict of Avengers Infinity War. And that movie was the #1 movie of 2018, and in a few weeks it is going to be the #1 movie of all time because economics is the center of that conflict, right? Like you need to understand like what's going to happen. What is the economy going to look like in the opening scenes of Avengers Endgame? Like what it is gives us an idea of how these people view economic growth and whether these models are correct or not. What I give here is evidence that Thanos isn't this strange person who had this idea about why economic growth is. That tradition goes back to the early 1800s and regularly recurs as this idea of what's going to happen to the world if population keeps growing. There are people today in Congress who argue that Thanos is right, though not explicitly. They will worry about the growth of population, and what we can do to ensure economic growth is actually to have fewer kids. So I go through and give that. And in fact, this video was just released Tuesday, but I'm pretty proud that if you go and search Avengers Endgame economics, that video is the #1 result. Of course, the problem is nobody goes and searches for Avengers Endgame economics, so we're going to work on that. But I highly recommend going and subscribing to my channel. It's called Market Power. Here's my plug. I'm just short of 1,000 subscribers, guys, and 1,000 is that threshold you need to get monetized. So if you want to help me send my kids to college one day, go subscribe to my channel. In fact, I'll pause for a second as you pull out your phones and go look. No. All right, let me start with a disclaimer. I am not here to tell you to not study other things. Okay, I'm not here to tell you this is why you shouldn't study accounting, this is why you shouldn't study business administration or like any other degree here, right? Like the Huntsman School offers a rich set of majors that are set up to help you succeed here not just here at Utah State, but in your careers. Okay, so I'm not here giving you the case for why other majors are not as good as economics, which they're not. But I am going to make the strongest case for why economics is an interesting field of study, that it will provide you a promising career, and that lots of great things will come if you choose to study economics. I went back somehow. I don't know how I went back. Let me tell you my 2 goals. Get you interested in economics, at least pique your interest, and convince you that if you do like economics, you can major in it and succeed. I didn't mention I teach the Management 1050 class. You saw about half the room raise their hands, so they had taken my class. I enjoy teaching that class a lot. If you have not taken Management 1050 yet, look at this next fall. Okay, I'm teaching both sections. There's 200 seats in each section, so come check it out. What is economics? This is a question that you probably get all the time. Or if you're signing up for your first economics class, what is it? The simplest definition of economics is the study of how people choose when they have resource constraints or when resources are scarce. Okay? We can't have everything. We need to make trade-offs. And so economists are here to study those trade-offs and see how changes affect those trade-offs. So this applies on the macro scale. And a lot of you, like when you think of economics, you probably think of the economy, maybe the stock market, the housing market, right? GDP, these kind of big words that get tossed around on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. Well, it applies to that, obviously. We have scarce resources. We have a finite number of people. We have a finite number of capital, right? Like we have certain machines, we have certain buildings, we have finite environmental resources. How do we take those scarce resources and combine to produce things? What do we choose to produce? Here in the US, we produce a lot of things, right? Some of our biggest, most valuable things we produce are biotech, tech generally, social media. Our manufacturing has gone in decline, though. Why is manufacturing declining? Why have we chosen to move our resources away from manufacturing and towards other things like the tech sector? Those are questions that we ask in economics, right? And you say, well, like I understand, I already know the answers, but it's not always obvious what those answers are or what the forces are that drive those changes. As we shift those resources, how do we decide, like what determines those shifts? So that's the big, grand scale. Economics also applies on what we would call the micro scale. The first one was macro, big, then we say micro. It applies in your daily life. You have limited resources. You have limited time, right? Everyone has 24 hours in a day. You're, somewhere from 18 to 24 years old. How am I deciding what I'm going to major in? I registered for classes this week. Which classes am I going to take? I have a limited amount of time in a day. I have an objective of finishing my degree. How do I take my limited resources, the classes that I need, and what do I choose to fill up my day? That is an economic problem. You're trying to figure out how to allocate your resources and what the costs and benefits are of different choices you're making. So economics applies everywhere. My wife makes fun of me because I keep saying everything is economics, and it really is. It really is that everything is economics. I see economics in nature. Animals make decisions based on economics. Plants make decisions based on economics. And it just gets integrated into the very fiber of our existence. Some of the main things that we look at in economics are incentives and constraints. Incentives are the things that, these are like rewards, things that, the benefits that we get from doing certain activities. Constraints are kind of like costs or how much we can do. Like we only have, again, a constraint would be I have 24 hours in a day. I need to sleep for a few of those hours. I need to be able to search on Tinder or Mutual to make sure I find a good match. So that's going to take a couple hours every day, right? Like what time is left over at the end of the day for me to actually study for these classes that affect my long-term development? That's a whole nother question, right? But these are like constraints. They're determining what you can do. You experience these every day, not just when you're picking your classes. I did an informal survey as some people were coming in. How many of you today are going to receive credit in a class for attending this lecture? All right. That is like, I think that was at least half the people here today, right? You are responding to incentives, and you're responding to constraints. How many options do you have after today to get that credit? Yeah, I see a lot of smiles where people are like, yeah, he knows exactly why I'm here today, right? Because you faced a constraint. There are no more Focus Friday lectures after today, and an incentive of I need to get that credit. And so whatever you had originally planned for today, this hour is now being captured by me. And I'm benefiting from that, right? Like I'm excited that you're here. Thank you so much. And I'm benefiting because you guys are providing the perfect example of how people respond to incentives and constraints and how economics is dictating your life. Thank you for being here today. I love it. I'm giddy about it right now. How do we use economics? So that is what is economics. How do we use it? We use it in lots of ways, but I've classified it into 3. We use it to explain behavior, to predict policy effects, and to prescribe actions that improve resource allocations. And I'm going to dive into all 3 of these. Let's start off with explaining behavior. Elinor Ostrom said the power of a theory is exactly proportional to the diversity of situations it can explain. Elinor Ostrom, 10 years ago, was the first and currently only woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics. So I'll take an aside right here and say, women, please consider studying economics because we need more women in the field. There are a lot of contributions. She is not going to be the last one. A lot of people on the short list for upcoming Nobel Prizes are women because they have made unique and interesting contributions to economics. And so I hope you will see that there's a big opportunity for you to study economics by coming here and contributing. But let's get back to what Elinor says. She says that the power of theory is directly proportional to the diversity of situations it can explain. We can come up with lots of theories for why things happen, but they're not very satisfying unless we can kind of derive general principles from it and understand how we can apply it to other situations, right? Good economic theory should be able to explain big things and little things. It should be able to explain why we trade with other countries, and it should be able to explain why you're here today. And that's what we do with economics. We try to go out and see how many different things we can describe using economic theory. Here's one of them, the theory of moral hazard. This is that people, so the basic assumption that you need for this is people respond to costs and benefits, and they'll do something if the benefits exceed the costs. Well, then the conclusion from just that assumption is that if we change the costs, if we provide you insurance, if we get rid of the downside of certain actions, you're going to go do those actions more. You'll take more risks because you get to experience the benefit and you don't have to experience the cost as much. Let me give you some. So now that's the theory. What's the diversity of situations that we can explain with this? Well, first, when we introduced seat belts as mandatory, we made all cars have seat belts, car accidents went up. Because beforehand, you weren't as protected if you got into a car accident, right? You get into a car accident, you have nothing there to protect you. This is at the same time that we get airbags, we get some other types of protections in the car, right? Well, if you are going to risk your life every time you throw yourself down a street in a husk of metal, you're going to be pretty careful about your speed and your actions. But if you're protected from that, you might take more risks. And you say, well, that doesn't make much sense. Like, people are still going to be careful about how they drive. Let me give you the opposite situation. If we made driving more dangerous, do you think you would be safer? Instead of seatbelts, what we should do is get a spear in the steering wheel right down the shaft and have it pointed directly at your heart. No airbags, no seatbelts, okay? Do you think you would tailgate people as much if that spear was right there in case you got into a fender bender? No, you're going to give pretty good clearance to people to make sure, right? Because there's an incentive. If I get into that car accident, I will impale myself. I better make sure that I don't drive as fast or as dangerously, or maybe, just maybe, I should take public transit instead, right? So that's an example of car accidents have increased, safety at the same time safety increased, moral hazard seems to be true. NFL injury rates are higher than they are in rugby. Football and rugby are pretty close to the same sport, right? Like, there's obviously some differences, and lovers of each are going to bash on the others. But for the general part, it's a bunch of sweaty men just running into each other as hard as they can, okay? But for some reason, concussions are much higher in the NFL than they are in rugby, which seems counterintuitive because in rugby, they are unprotected, right? It's just full on body against body. Whereas in NFL, we have pads, we have helmets. Why is it that these things are failing to protect them? Well, when you are protected from the impact of hitting somebody else, you have the incentive to actually hit them harder. And you would never get something like targeting, just throwing your body out there like a torpedo, willing to hit somebody else helmet to helmet, head to head, if that was actually your head experiencing the damage, right? So because we protect these athletes, they take greater risks, they're protected from the costs, and the benefit is they get a major hit, they stop the play, they get big paydays. The long run cost is brain damage and all those other things, but we're all dead in the long run anyway, so who cares about that? Another example, banks will make riskier investments if the government bails them out. This is something that has a huge macro impact, right? If banks know that they will be protected if all of their investments all suddenly go south, then they're going to go out and go risk that. They're going to take, because the upside of that, of these risky investments, is that you might invest in a really big company that hits it off and brings you in millions or billions of dollars. But if you've over-leveraged yourself, if you've backed a wrong horse, and they fail, you might also lose millions and billions of dollars. But then the government steps in and stops that loss. Then you're like, hey, this is fantastic. I get all of the upside, none of the downside. I should go out and make more riskier investments. And in fact, that is what we see. We see banks making riskier decisions than they would because they're protected from the government. Now you say, okay, cars, mildly interesting. NFL, we might have some fans here. Government, banks, not so interesting. Let's talk something real. This is the frequency of the term casual sex in all of English literature from 1900 to the present. Okay? So if you're familiar with Google Ngrams, Google has digitized all books. All books, basically the entire corpus of English literature. And they can go through and find how phrases that appear, and you can see the frequency vary over time. And what we see is the phrase casual sex was non-existent in 1900. It starts to rise in the mid-1920s and goes level, and then has taken off since the end. Casual sex is a risky behavior, right? It is this idea of, so the what? All right, guys, this was actually a trap. It's time for the birds and the bees and explaining to you what happens when a daddy economist and a mommy economist come together. They make a free market, okay? No, this is the idea. What are the risks associated with casual sex, right? This is, biggest risk is probably unplanned pregnancies, right? This worry about creating a human life that you're now invested in. Other types of risks are sexually transmitted diseases, heartbreak, any other type of thing, right? Like there are a lot of risks invested in it. There are also a lot of benefits from it, as we now uncomfortably shift. So, why all of a sudden do we have this big increase in casual sex? Well, let me put forth a correlation. In 1960 was the first time the pill was invented. That was the first birth control pill. Okay. This takes away a major cost of casual sex, that maybe there's going to be an unplanned child, right? Great benefit, right? This is a fantastic, people have more opportunity to make their fertility decisions. They have more control over what's going on, right? So that's great, but it also takes away some of the costs of those types of interactions. And what economic theory predicts is that if we remove the costs and keep the benefits, right? That's the nice thing about the birth control pills, everybody. You get to keep all the benefits of sex and get rid of the costs, right? Like that's the point, right? Things like other contraceptives aren't as fun to use, and so they take away some of the benefits. Everyone's like shifting all uncomfortably. You're all in college, come on. Okay, this is no moral statement over birth control, casual sex, or anything here. This is showing you a prediction that economic theory would have is if you take away some of the costs, you're going to, and keep the benefits, people will engage in that activity more. Okay, so this is fantastic. What I'm trying to show you is that economics just applies to so many different facets of your life that it has just this really intrinsic, interesting thing for you to study. So it explains behavior. Now let's move on to predicting policy effects. This is something we're really interested in, right? We want to know what is the effect if we intervene. Now, if you're a government, if you're a business, you want to know if we do this policy, what is going to be the effect of it? Are we going to get the sales we want? Are we going to keep people out of jail? Are we going to improve public health? All of these types of things are policy effects that we want to be able to predict because engaging in policy can be quite costly. You can go and expend huge resources towards a policy that ends up not being very effective or might even make things really, really bad. So we want to be able to predict these things before it happens. Here's just a casual, not a casual, well, now I can't say casual in the rest of this lecture, can I? Here's an example. If we build a public rail system, how many people will use it, right? That's important. Building a public, let's build basically railroad transit, light rail transit, whatever. We're going to have to lay out all those rails. We're going to have to get the cars. We're going to put people on it. We're going to have to deal with people like my dad who always watch tracks go along the freeway and say that thing is never full. Like, why are we spending tax dollars on that? Right? We want to understand how many people are actually using these things. And if we sink this huge cost into building this, is our economy going to benefit from it? So there's an important reason why we want to do this. And it's fundamentally an economic problem. Not just what we want to know if people are going to actually use it, but whether people use it is actually an economic problem. You have lots of options about how you can commute. You can use your car, bus, bike, walk, right? All of these are different options to get from one place to another. And you say, well, if I want to get to Salt Lake, there's no way I'm walking there. Well, historically, that is how people got there, right? Like today, you just don't even consider it an option because the cost would be too great. But historically, that was one of the things. So we have these different options on how to get from point A to point B. We need to figure that out. Building another option, or building that public rail is another option, right? In addition to car, bus, we now are adding light rail. And so now people with their scarce resources are going to have to decide, do I use the car, the bus, or this new option? I'm trying to decide between them. What are the costs of using each? What are the benefits of using each? This exact question is what San Francisco asked in the 1960s as it was building BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. While building it, the engineers predicted that 15% of commuters would use BART. This would be this amazing thing. People would come in and they'd flock. Now, obviously, this isn't the majority, but 15% of commuters, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, that's a pretty large number. Daniel McFadden, who lived in the Bay Area, he's a professor at Berkeley and also Nobel laureate, he thought through this and said, no one has actually thought about the economics behind this. I don't know how they historically did this. Like, it's bizarre to me to think that they didn't take into account economics. Today, we probably do some machine learning to try and figure it out, which has economics in it. But McFadden actually went through and said, well, people are deciding whether they want to use the car or bus right now. What are the things that influence their decisions? If we add a public rail system in there, how does that system compare to the options that are already there? And in which case are the costs going to outweigh the benefits that people will now switch from what they're doing to this new option? So we developed an economic model, collected some survey data, and then predicted that only 6.3% of travelers would use it. When the BART was completed, the actual number was 6.2%. He was able to predict the actual outcome within a tenth of a percentage point. Now, I bring this up because this is like this heroic, yes, like I'm totally cherry picking this fantastic option where we predicted the exact thing that would happen. A lot of people would say, well, what about 2008 and the Great Recession? Economists weren't predicting that. What happened there? Economics must be wrong. Well, we're developing, okay? We're growing, we're learning. You just have to like roll with the punches, guys, right? Like, you don't realize like how much worse the Great Depression was than the Great Recession. And the reason why the Great Depression was so much worse is because we did not understand and we were unable to predict outcomes as well as we were in 2008. And so a lot of the reason that even though 2008 caught many economists by surprise, the reason why we were able to moderate a lot of the effects is because of the predictive power that we've gained in the century since the Great Depression. So that's so I guess I should go back. Like, there's a lot of reasons why we want to forecast and predict what's going to happen, and so economics comes in and helps us do that. It also helps us prescribe actions. What do I mean by prescribed actions? How can we allocate our resources more efficiently? Looking at my constraints, looking at my incentives, what should I do to improve my life or to improve the lives of others? Let me give you my favorite example, and that's kidney transplants. I love it because it's this strange, you might not think there's economics involved. In fact, let me show you. There's a scarcity. Kidneys are scarce, right? There are only 2 per person. And it's not like we haven't gotten to lab-grown kidneys yet. So right now, we're limited to the number of kidneys that exist in human bodies. But they're not as scarce as you think because each person only really needs 1. As long as you have 1 kidney, you can survive. So you have the kidney you need to survive and another one that you can donate to somebody else. So they're not as scarce as we think. But also they are still a little scarce because you can't just have anybody's kidney. You need a match. It has to be somebody who has, I don't know the exact way, something with blood type, something whatever. You have to test and see if this kidney actually is a good match for you. So I think, for instance, I would not be able to donate to my mom if she needed a kidney because even though we're genetically related, there's something about, I think we have different blood types. So that automatically means I can't donate to her. By the way, my blood type is A positive because good grades are in my blood. That's how I remember that. That's how I remember what my blood type is, by the way. All right. So how do we get kidneys, this scarce resource, to people who need them to live? We could save lives if we could get people if we could find kidneys for them. And so there's demand for this. People want this, but the resource is scarce. How are we going to do this? Well, one suggestion might be, let's just sell kidneys. Let's give people the option to, if you pay me a couple $1,000s, I will happily give you a kidney. Maybe it'll take a few million. Whatever the price is, like somebody is going to be willing to give that kidney. That's not allowed. Okay, we've outlawed that. And maybe that's all right. There's obviously good ethical reasons why we might not want people able to sell their organs. But given that constraint, that is a constraint. We can't use prices. How do we then figure out how to get people kidneys who need them? This is where Al Roth comes in. Al Roth is also a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He came up with a model of how you could allocate kidneys across people without using prices. No prices involved. And the key to this model was that somebody like me, who would want to donate a kidney to my mom, but can't, might be willing to donate to somebody who I am a match for, as long as they had a match for my mom, right? So let me explain how this goes. So vertically, you have on top, so the top row are people who have healthy kidneys and they're willing to donate. The bottom are people who need a kidney. Well, vertically, I'm willing to donate down to these people, but I can't. I'm not a match. However, if we could find each other, I might be willing to say, I will give you a kidney in exchange for your donor giving my recipient their kidney. We go across. We're matches here. So we need to be able to find people who match and can exchange kidneys without any prices, right? All we're doing is this agreement that I will give my kidney in exchange for yours. Al Roth developed an algorithm and a whole organization surrounded around this kidney exchange. Using that economic model, he figured out how to make sure nobody would want to cheat, because then you have this issue where I get my kidney, and then we run, and the other couple is out a kidney and that still needs one, right? So we need a way to run this all to make sure nobody wants to run away and everybody gets what they want. And it's not just two pairs anymore. It's not just two groups of people. Just last year, 200 people from 12 states all got together to exchange kidneys. So that way 100 people's lives were saved with kidney donations. This isn't, like, when they first came up with this algorithm, they were worried that anything past 3 pairs would be intractable. There was no way that we could actually bring all these people together and have all of the incentives in place to save just those 3 lives. And yet here, 100 lives were either saved or improved as a result of this economist's work. It's fantastic to me. He's actually credited with saving thousands of lives just through this algorithm that he's developed. So this is where I want to pause and just point out, like, so this gets to the end of, like, what is economics, why study economics, kind of generally. And that is that I really feel economics is truth. And that you are here, hopefully, on a search for truth. As you are going out and studying and learning, like, you should be finding true things, holding on to those things, and figuring out what you need to learn from that truth. I'm a religious person. I've had spiritual experiences that I'm not going to discuss here. But I just want to say that I find a lot of my experiences with economics, when I see that economics helped save 100 lives in one go just through this algorithm, like, I get similar spiritual experiences from seeing that as I do in my Sunday worship. And so that to me is an experience with truth that I hope that you can have with whatever you decide to study. I hope you're seeking for truth and that you're using it to help your life. All right, let's get into, hopefully now you're interested in economics. I'm interested in it, but do I really want to major in it? People keep telling me they are, but there are just no jobs in economics. And one day I texted my wife this. So many people are saying I would major in economics, but there just aren't any jobs. And my wife was flabbergasted. She responded, no jobs, that is where all the jobs are. And I have data to back this up. But first, let's look at some headlines. Uber's secret weapon is the team of economists. Amazon has a website called AmazonEconomistJobs.com. Like, that is the full URL right there in the middle of the screen. This just came out in the Harvard Business School, the research magazine. Hunting for a hot job in high tech, try digitization economists. That was just a few months ago. Okay? Lots of articles lately about how economics is such a burgeoning field. This just came out a month ago. See, March 13th, 2019. Amazon gets an edge with its secret squad of PhD economists. By the way, like, I love secret squad of economists. Like, I think I gotta get that website name or something. Okay, Amazon's economists game out real estate decisions, set the lowest prices that will deliver a profit, precisely determine what customers care about and whether advertisements are working, all using machine learning algorithms that automate decision making on a massive scale. So the economists here are coming in and they're trying to figure out how to optimize the business. And you say, well, you know, maybe that's some greedy outcome. Amazon's just trying to maximize profits. I love it because I get cheap stuff. And here in like, we don't even have a proper bookstore here in Cache Valley, right? Like, if I wanted to go and find the newest books, often I would have to drive out of the valley to go to a bookstore. Instead, what I can do is just go to Amazon, click a link, and within 2 days, that book, at the cheapest price available in the world, arrives at my doorstep. Because economists are trying to figure out the way to maximize profits. I love it. Uber's secret weapon, for sake of brevity, I'm just going to skip past this one, but Uber is using economists to improve their business as well. Here is data for doctoral recipients. So for people who get PhDs in all fields, this is from the National Science Foundation study of earned doctorates. This asks, how many of you have definite plans for graduation? Pretty much, do you have a job once you graduate? For all PhDs granted in 2017, 59% of PhDs said they had a job lined up when they graduated. 59%. That's, at the time they took that survey. I imagine after a few months, most of them get employed. Unless you're getting a history PhD or something. But let's look at engineers. Everyone's like, engineers are so great, right? Engineers, 57% of PhDs. So they actually got like slightly lower employment rates. Again, this is at the time they took the survey, right as they're graduating. Maybe they're trying to figure something out. History PhDs, 52%. Sociology PhDs, 61%. Political science, 63%. And I bring up history, sociology, and political science because I find them comparable fields of study to economics. What do economics PhDs look like? 74% of economics PhDs graduate with a job in hand, or whatever definite plans is, essentially a job. Okay, that's a huge. This is the number one PhD for employment out of all of them. Number two is business. Okay, so if you get a business PhD, you're also really high up there. You say, but I don't want a PhD. Is economics only good if I get a PhD? No, economics is still great as an undergraduate degree. To show you that, let me show you a survey from PayScale Incorporated. This is available online on the Wall Street Journal. They surveyed 1.2 million people who only had a bachelor's degree in economics, and said, "What is your survey when what was your salary when you graduated?" And then a few years out, what's your salary? This is one I give it in my class, so I cherry pick all the business ones. And just to show you, the highest one is economics. They have the highest median starting salary at $50,000. And then 10 years after graduation, they still have the highest median salary. That means half of people with only a bachelor's degree make more than what we see up here. To point out that you're in a pretty good position no matter what you decide to major here in the Huntsman School, right? I didn't go out and pick low-paying majors. These are all high-paying majors, just showing you that economics is very high. This gives you some of the variation. Let's say you want to be at the top 10%. 10% of people with just a bachelor's degree, 10 years after graduating, make more than $210,000 if you major in economics. The highest among all of those, right? And if you were worried you're going to end up at the low end, you still are going to make the highest salary on that end, okay? There are jobs in economics, and they pay well. I have profiles from friends. I have got a lot of them, but these are friends that have bachelors in economics, and they have a diversity of careers. This is a friend who is was a talent agent down in LA. He's now working in social gaming, helping companies improve their social gaming platforms. This is a friend from college who worked in corporate finance, went into law school, now does legal work here in Utah. A friend that's doing data analytics for Google and helping them do speech recognition. Just lots and lots. I wish I could go through all of them. This is another one. She majored in economics, only a major. Well, okay, she's now moved on to a master's just this last year, but she was working on helping poor countries and what kind of policies help people escape poverty. Okay, again, like using economics to figure out the most effective way to deliver people out of poverty. Why are economics majors doing so well? Why do we have a vast amount, there's a variety of careers represented there. High-paying jobs, why is it that economics does so well? Let me rephrase this question. Why does LeBron James lift weights? And you say, what does this have to do with anything? My son, he's 8 now. He is strong enough to throw a basketball up into a hoop. It does not take that much muscle to get that ball up into the hoop, right? Why is it that LeBron James has to lift? We have a couple of athletes here, track, cross country. They lift, right? You have lift days. Okay, running, right? You could say, the reason why LeBron James lifts is because he's jostling with people. He needs to be stronger than them to get into the hoop. Okay? Well, there's not that much jostling going on in track, cross country. Why do they lift weights then? It's because your muscles are the center of movement. They're the foundation. And you need to have a good foundation for you then to go out and apply. And so that's why all sports, especially at the professional level, engage in some sort of weight training to make sure they develop their foundation, and then they go out and practice things, right? LeBron James does practice his free throws. He practices layups. He practices jump shots. Could he benefit more from practicing those things? Well, obviously he thinks it's more like he needs to give up some of that time to develop that strength and make sure that he can actually go out and perform and move at a level he is expected to move. You develop general skills as an economics major. You're going to assess empirical relationships. You're going to try and identify causal relationships. Does the minimum wage cause unemployment? Does delivering textbooks to a poor country, their schools, does that actually increase education? You might try to assess unintended consequences. What happens when we change costs and benefits and then get this result that we didn't expect? For instance, I've done research showing that the introduction of smartphones has led to an increase in child injuries because we have changed the costs and benefits of supervising your children, and as a result, you get distracted, you don't pay attention, and those kids get injured. We'll talk about designing markets and incentives. What kind of incentives, costs, benefits need to be in place to make sure that we get the desirable outcomes? What happens when we put regulations on markets? Do we get the outcome that we want? Do we get a worse outcome than we wanted? On a business level, what are the costs and benefits that our customers face towards doing what we're asking them to do? You're going to learn data analysis, econometrics, basic statistics. You're going to get a lot of those skills that people really want. So an example here is the benefits of going to a really selective school. We've just had this big college admission scandal where people are paying on the order of $500,000 to get their kids into these selective schools. And some economists said, is that even beneficial? Is going to one of these selective schools beneficial? And obviously, if we just look at like the average graduate from Stanford versus the average graduate from here at Utah State, the average graduate at Stanford makes more money. The question is why? Is it that Stanford is a better school than Utah State and delivers a better education that makes those people more productive? Or because Stanford only admits a certain number of people, do they just cherry pick the cream of the crop and then those people are going to do well even if they hadn't gone to school? If there was no college and we all just went out into the labor market, who would end up doing well? How do we figure out which theory is correct? Well, the two economists, Stacey Dale and Alan Kruger, addressed this question. They didn't look at where you graduated. They looked at which schools did you apply to. If you're a Utah State student and you applied to Stanford but chose to come to Utah State, what salary did you end up making? And if you look at just where students apply, not where they graduate, it turns out there's no benefit to going to the more selective school. That if you applied to Stanford but went to Utah State, you're just as likely to get a high salary as somebody who graduates from Stanford. Okay, and it's this idea, so this gives us a confirmation that is Stanford picking off the cream of the crop that's allowing them to get a really high earnings. Why does this matter? Because the reason why we look at these things is to develop general skills, to help you understand the questions we need to ask to explain the behavior that we observe. And so the advice that I give my students is I messed up the lead into that one. Here are other fields that use economics. Law and economics. We're using this in understanding the costs and benefits of certain legal punishments. Health economics. Why does insurance cost so much? Economists are diving into this. Political science, education, accounting. Forensic accounting has at its base economics, trying to understand the incentives that people face when they go out and cheat. And then the accounting comes in, and how do we actually identify when people do that? Okay? Economics is being used in so many different fields. So the advice I give my students is don't spend college practicing your jump shot if you don't even know you want to play basketball yet. Develop those general skills that'll help you, right? Work on that weightlifting. Develop that foundation. And then when you finish that, you get to your job, they'll figure out how to train you to help you out, to get you the skills that you need for that specific job. But in the meantime, make sure you have the best foundation so that way you can build whatever you need to on top of that foundation. I think that's it. I'm open for a quick Q&A now.
Any questions?
Awkward transition, I'm sorry. Questions range for why should I study economics, what kind of careers are available in economics, why do you wear so many blue shirts, anything like that, okay?
Hi, my name's John. I'm in Information Systems and Accounting. I was wondering, so you showed the statistic about economics majors earning more than the other majors at the Huntsman School. I want to know, what are they doing? Like, what are their career paths?
That was not from the Huntsman School. So the majors...
That's overall. Okay.
Yeah, that's overall. Those majors were just majors offered by the Huntsman School, just to be clear. What are they doing? I mean, like that, for time, I brushed through just like the examples that I had from my personal thing. I mean, what aren't they doing? I don't know. It's like hard to say. Like, you open yourself up to so many different careers when you have that foundation in economics, because you have the structures in place to analyze problems. You get some basic data skills, so that way, even if you wanted to go more into data analytics, information systems, then you can do that once you get into that career path. This isn't, I don't make an argument that people shouldn't pursue things that are valuable and interesting while they're still undergraduates, but that a lot of careers are willing to train you on the things that you need for that specific job. So for information systems, you might learn C, Python, C++, right? You learn a couple of those foundational languages, and then it turns out they have their proprietary language that they use at that place, right? And they're gonna train you in that language, and it's gonna be really easy for you to pick that up because you have that foundation. Similar thing going on in economics. Those specific skills that you need for a job are really easy to pick up if you already have that foundation. Thanks, John.
I was wondering what your thoughts were on the Disney streaming service undercutting Netflix's prices.
Oh, yeah, they announced it. So last night, Disney Plus, which is the Disney competitor for Netflix, announced their price is going to be $6.99 a month or $69.99 for an annual subscription. Netflix is up to what, like $14 a month right now? Obviously, this is what we, like, if you were considering what Disney was going to price their streaming service at, it was obviously we're going to come at a really low price. Why is it obvious? What are the incentives and constraints that Disney is facing? Incentive-wise, they need to be able to compete with Netflix. And Netflix already has basically everybody in the world subscribed to their service. So you have to think, what's the marginal cost? People don't want, if you price it at $14 a month, you're trying to compete with that price. No, people want to be able to keep Netflix and get Disney Plus. A lot of people, right? So you have to make sure that you price it at an attractive point to make sure that you get people who want to keep both. You have to have an attractive point for those families that think that this is only for their kids, that Netflix is developing more into an HBO type service that is going to provide premium content at a premium price, and Disney is going to be targeted more towards kids. Well, and if you want to get parents to buy stuff for their kids, you have to deliver it at a low price. Other things, cost of acquiring services. Netflix has to buy content or generate their own content for it to be a good service. Disney already owns the most valuable properties in the entire world. They don't have to, they've already spent the money to acquire those. That it's just pure profit coming into the streaming service right now. So again, they can afford to go really low. They're developing their own content services right now because they want more attractive things for people to come in. They know they have to keep people on the system. But if you look at the costs and benefits of Disney entering into this service, it's clear that they want to keep it at a low price. And there are a lot of people who are like, oh, well, they're going to get a bunch of people in, they're going to jack up the price. No, because you can just drop it as soon as they jack that price up, people run. That's what's happened with Netflix. They're experiencing that. And so in terms of like predicting, explaining, like economics just comes in and all that. Like, I'm excited for Disney Plus. We'll probably drop Netflix.
Any other questions?
So you talked a little bit about Avengers Infinity War and Endgame that's here in 2 weeks.
Yes.
What are your predictions as far as the outcome for Avengers
Oh.
Endgame?
Okay. The outcome, I mean, it's going to involve time travel of some sort, right? So this gets, okay, let me tell you some of my economics as I've developed with the Marvel movies. I went and saw Captain America Civil War opening weekend. And even though it was amazing, and it was probably like one of the most perfect Marvel movies to that point, I left a little disappointed. Because that final conflict between Captain America and Iron Man, when they're duking it out fist to fist, they'd already shown that whole thing in the trailers. And I was just really upset that I had already seen that. And so I realized that I needed to stay away from spoilers coming into the movie. So that way I could, like, when I saw that trailer, it was this emotional, like, charged experience, right? Wow, this is really exciting to see this go on. I can't wait to see this movie. And it turns out they'd already given away the best part. Now, like Marvel Studios has realized the cost of revealing those kind of things, and as a result, they're actually holding back a lot of information to make sure that it's a great experience for everyone. In fact, they're intentionally engaging in subterfuge and deception to make sure people don't know what's going on, right? The trailers have false information in them. For instance, I was actually thinking about this morning. I might make a video explaining some of the incentives for them, because I'm convinced there's that scene where they're all walking in their new white suits, and it's like really exciting. You get to see them all together. Like, and you have James Rhodes, War Machine. He's walking there. He's going in his big suit. I'm convinced that's not actually War Machine. I think that's Hulk, and they've edited out the Hulk because they don't want people to see that Bruce Banner can now turn into the Hulk, and not only can he turn into the Hulk, he's got pretty good control over his actions. That's a pretty huge spoiler. But I don't think it's War Machine right there. It's not consistent with the story they've been telling. War Machine has always been a side character, kind of swooped in the final fight. He hasn't been a central character. And I think the incentive they have is to keep that secret, so that way it's a big reveal when people go out there and watch that movie, right? So watch it. I'm going to see it Thursday night, that opening night at 6 o'clock. I was actually on the phone. So people know this. So the day the tickets went on sale, I forgot that morning that they were on sale. And so when I jumped on, all the good seats had already been sold. So I have like one of the crappy front row seats. And I was on the phone with Megaplex Theaters yesterday, like with their headquarters down in Salt Lake City, trying to convince them to let me do a video where I pay somebody to switch seats with me. Like, I want to go in and auction off my seat in exchange for their seat and pay them a premium. Like, hey, switch seats for me, same movie. Like, you get to be at the same showing, but you have a different seat and maybe like an extra $100 at the end of the night. And I want to see like what it's going to take to get somebody to switch seats with me. And I think it's going to be, they're really interested in it. They're worried about the optics. So like, I'm really hoping that it's going to work out. It's going to be awesome.
All right. Well, let's give it up for Professor Craig Palsson. That was great.